Hi everyone, my name is Kristen and welcome to my channel where we explore an experiential approach to manifestation, or as I like to call it, the law of reflection. In today's video, we're going to be talking about self-love, what this actually is, how you do it, and what the actual role of self-love is in the awakening and manifestation process. Do we actually need to love ourselves in order to manifest a particular desire? So this is quite a nuanced answer, but I'm going to be straightforward that on the superficial level, the answer is no. Technically, you do not need to love yourself in order to experience a particular manifestation. The divine mirror reflects back to you your identity of self. So, as long as you were able to assume a particular identity, the mirror would reflect it back regardless of whether you loved yourself or not. Sometimes we may think that in order to manifest a romantic relationship, for example, we do need to love ourselves. Now, I would argue that you don't need self-love in order to manifest a relationship, but you do need it if you want to manifest love with that person. But we'll talk more about that later. So self-love really comes into it more when it comes to relating to the particular desire, especially if it is a love relationship. But self-love is a factor no matter what the desire is. So even if it is a desire for more money, even if it is a desire to start your own business or to travel to a particular location, whatever it may be, self-love is still part of that process too. Because when we align with a particular desired state, what happens is that the self we are embodying, that we have identified ourselves to be, and all of the layers that go with that, they are reflected back to us in the mirror of the physical world, in the divine mirror. Now, because they are being reflected back, this is to show us the identifications of self that we need to let go of in order to actually experience that which we want to experience. And in order to let go of limiting identifications of self, we actually need to love those identifications. This is how we integrate them and they stop running the show in the background. And when they're no longer running the show in the background, the mirror stops reflecting them back in the physical world. Self-love is actually the answer to all of the perceived obstacles that tend to appear on the manifestation process. So whether it is dealing with negative thoughts, whether it is unpleasant feelings or triggers or trauma resurfacing or impatience or whatever the case may be, there is no scenario where self-love is not the answer to it. Self-love is the solution to all perceived problems. So when we learn to love ourselves when our thoughts are spiraling, when we are not in the best mood, when we are triggered by something from the past, when we are feeling resentful or reacting to someone or something, when we learn to love ourselves in all of those moments, what we actually do is we bring healing to that part of ourself that is in reaction, because what has happened there is we have forgotten who we truly are in that moment, that we are the divine, that we are source consciousness or God, whichever word works best for you. We've forgotten who we truly are, and we have gotten caught up in the seemingly separate self that is in reaction to something in particular. So we have gone into one of our false identities, so to speak. These identities arise for a reason. It's actually part of the awakening process. You will always have the blueprint to your own awakening. Anything that arises is just coming up for you to love it. It's coming up for you to accept it. And when you learn how to do that, and it's surprisingly easy, and I will teach you at the end of the video, when you learn to do that, it moves you further towards whatever it is that you want to experience. Now, what most people tend to do on the manifestation journey, if we want to call it that, is that the moment something arises, they panic or they suppress it or they try to run away from it or they try to affirm over it or think something different. So then they suppress or abandon this element of self that has really come up to return back to love. And if you were to do that every time something comes up, you would start to heal the self very rapidly. Now, when I use the word healing, I'm not saying it in the traditional way of a big healing journey or a trajectory or going down the rabbit hole and having to do shadow work, inner child work, and all these different modalities. Nothing wrong with those, of course, but I'm not talking about that. Self-love can just be the answer to all of those. Self-love can be the alternative. And it's also the quickest way for the self to heal and transform, because essentially these parts of the self that are arising into your awareness just need to be loved anyway. So anytime you experience something that you don't like, whether that's the inner world of thoughts and feelings and perceptions, or whether it's the outer world, which again, there is really no duality between the two, but just for the sake of this video, no matter what you are in reaction to, if you bring it back into love within yourself, if you observe it, you hold it in acceptance and love that part of you, it will dissolve fairly quickly. Now, you may have to do this a few times, but that's okay. It's worth the time that it takes. And as I said, it's a lot quicker than any other modality. So if you learn to love yourself in every moment, no matter what is coming up, this will actually get you closer and closer to alignment with the desire. And when you do experience the manifestation of the desire, because you already have this foundation of self-love in place, you will actually be able to sustain it. You will have the capacity to hold it. Now, it's not uncommon, and I myself have experienced this too, that we can bring something in, we can experience the desire that we wish to experience, but then we push it back out or we sabotage it or we react to it in some way because we haven't learned to love all parts of ourselves. So this idea that you have to fully love everything about yourself first before desire comes in is not true. Self-love will speed up the process. Self-love will give you the most effortless, easiest process, absolutely. But it doesn't stop once the desire comes in. Now that's really important. I can't emphasize that to you enough. It doesn't stop when the relationship or when the desire comes in. You must keep it going. And also remember that loving the self is not just something we do in relation to romantic relationships. It must be done in relation to anything, anything at all, because everything we come into contact with, everything that we perceive is always mirroring back an element of the self. And if you are not feeling in love, if you are not feeling peaceful and calm and in the present moment, then you have moved out of self-love. Now you cannot be in love or out of love at the same time. You can only be in one or the other. And if you've moved out of love, then you are being invited via a circumstance to come back in. So when it comes to what self-love actually is and how to do it, so to speak, firstly, the clue is in the name. So self-love, loving the self. So the self that we are talking about here is the dream character, this self-concept, this idea of who you are. So in my case, it's the character of Kristen. Now, as we already know, the self is not the truth of who you are. It is who you as the divine are expressing as. We are all God in drag. We are all God in costume, right? So in loving the self, this means recognizing who you truly are first. That you are not the costume, you are not the character that God is wearing, you are God itself, you are consciousness, you are the divine. So in order to do this, connect with the observer that is behind the thoughts, the observer that is behind the emotions, behind all perceptions of all experience, and meditate into that. Notice the silence between your thoughts. Notice the space underneath them. This silence, this constant awareness that never goes away is the truth of who you truly are. The rest of it is all self, it's all character. So when you get used to resting as the observer, and I don't want to say becoming the observer because you're never not the observer, you always are. We just forget and we fail to recognize it. But when you realize and recognize that you are the observer and you train your attention to keep going back within, to keep going there, and to calmly watch the self as it's thinking, feeling, perceiving, making opinions, forming judgments, whatever the case may be. If you strengthen and ground yourself in that, when an element of the self arises that is not in love, and you will know that because it will feel unpleasant or it will think unpleasant, then you hold that in your awareness, firstly, without judging it. Love doesn't judge, love does not suppress. So love is unconditional acceptance. So accept it unconditionally, even if it does feel scary. Accepting it does not mean it is going to manifest. Your emotions and thoughts are not manifesting anything. Manifestation works by the divine mirror reflecting back the self that you are being. So if you observe the disempowered self that is currently present and hold it in unconditional love, hold it in unconditional acceptance, feel love for that self and connect to it within yourself, it will transmute it. It will transform because love transforms everything. Love is the most powerful force in the entire universe. And as it transforms, the mirror then reflects back this transformed version of self. So you didn't need to micromanage your thoughts. You don't need to change your emotions. All you need to do is accept and love that part of the self, continue to give it love, and move forward in that. And then you will be more and more aligned to the desired experiences. So when we are resistant to a circumstance, this is because, firstly, we have a perception of what that circumstance means that we are projecting onto it. And ultimately, this comes from the fact that we do not love the seemingly separate self that we become in the face of that circumstance. We don't love who we become. And that is why we project it out onto the circumstance. We make other people or we make experiences the scapegoat for the fact that we are refusing and withholding love from ourselves in that moment. So whenever you feel resistant to something, go to self-love first. And that is how you will break through any type of resistance at all. If you were to use self-love every single day as one of your main practices, not only would this bring about rapid healing, rapid transformation of the self, it will also be the quickest and most effortless way to experience the desire. Hope this helps.